All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Miranda Stiers. I am the Capacity Building Program Specialist here with the partnership, and my pronouns are they, them, theirs. Welcome to our last Prevention Peer Network webinar of 2019. Woot woot! So, very excited about today's webinar and for so many folks who are joining us. I am going to let my colleagues introduce themselves. Whoever would like to start.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Alejandra Aguilar at the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence as well, leading our statewide prevention program. So excited to be here with you all today. Great conversations. We will be continuing from a previous one on evaluation. Yeah, I will share more about Pat, but I'll let Pat introduce herself.
Yes, hi, Pat Reyes. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. I work with Strategic Prevention Solutions, an evaluation research and planning firm, which we have a long history in the field of prevention of intimate partner violence and many other things. And I have been doing supporting people in evaluation for many years, mainly in the Bay Area, and look forward to continuing our discussion about some evaluation tools, and today's tool will be on logic models.
Thanks, Pat.
All right. So for folks who have joined us before, some of this is going to seem repetitive, but that's okay. Note that the webinar is being recorded, so if you have to step away or things come up, we know this happens, you want to share all the information with your colleagues, know that this will be up in our resource library shortly. Just some housekeeping. If you want to unmute yourself, you are absolutely welcome to do that. If you're having trouble hearing us or us hearing you, you can always click on join audio, or you may have a little arrow up. So you can switch from either calling in or your computer audio. It says video has been disabled, but really pretty flexible. If folks want to be on camera, again, just know that this will be stored for prosperity. You can see all the participants who are here, and you can chat. So if you see a friend on here that you want to say, hey, how you doing? You can do that privately, or you can chat to everyone. So I know we're going to have a lot of interaction with today's meeting. If at any time you have to leave, you can just click leave the meeting. And we should be set. So for our opening, we're going to have our opening circle as we always do. Want to know who's joining us, where folks are from. Then we're going to be going into our webinar, which will be the GPS for prevention, creating and using logic models for program planning and evaluation with Pat, who is amazing. We'll have some time for questions and answers and possibly some discussion time at the end. So let's get going with who is here with us. Please share your name, pronouns, and agency. You can either unmute and introduce yourselves or use the chat if you're more comfortable.
Hi, this is Beth Kirarte from Ruby's Place in Hayward, as she, her, hers.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, this is Sheridan Riolo. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm at Stand Strong in San Luis Obispo.
You don't have to, did you unmute?
Feel better.
Hey everybody, this is Holly Grace Curry from Haven in Modesto. I just wanted to hop on with the funny hat, so loving what you got going on there, Miranda and Alejandra.
Love the hat, Holly Grace.
Thanks. Oh, I use she, her pronouns.
Great to see you.
Yeah,
Janie.
we have some folks who are in shared spaces, so.
Christy Riles from A Window Between Worlds, she, her, hers. Good morning.
Riko Ozaki, she, her, attorney in Sacramento. Welcome. Jessica Villalobos with Futures Without Violence. Totally understand being sick and wanting to stick to chat. And Matilda is joining us with she, her, hers from Center for Pacific Asian Families. And Victor Vang from Center for Pacific Asian Families. Right. Geraldine Stapleton with Hollywood Now, she, her, hers. All right, I love it. Have folks joining us from all over the state, so really looking forward to our conversation. It's a couple of things, if folks may be aware, we have a little training coming up in March. Our Building Change Together Prevention Core Competencies training will be taking place twice this year. We'll be having it March 3rd through 5th in Los Angeles, and again in Concord at the end of the month on the 24th through the 26th. Know that if you don't receive our prevention newsletter, please go ahead and type your name in, email address into the chat so we can get that out to you, and we will be opening registration hopefully tomorrow, if not then next week. And with this training, if you are a member of the partnership, it is a free training. If you're not a member, it's only $90. And I know we have some folks on here who have attended previously. So we have options for those who have attended before. We take a deeper dive into track 2. And then if you just want to learn about prevention and what does a successful prevention program need, and what is community mobilization, what is community organization, and how do I do that? This is the training for you. We are going to go through all of the components of what a successful prevention program needs. You'll be able to do a deep dive analysis of your program over the 3 days that you're with us, and really you can either look at your prevention program as a whole or one specific strategy, and really being able to do some analysis and consideration on what those strategies are, what some challenges are, and at the end you'll be able to build an action plan of how you're going to take all of this fabulous information back. You'll also be able to network with an amazing network of peers from all across the state. We do have space for 30 in each track, so about 60 folks from all across the state can join. We will have limited travel stipends for those who are traveling more than 100 miles. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. I am more than happy to provide any and all information.
Huge recommendation for folks to invite their team members, anyone who's involved in prevention or who wants to learn about prevention. I know we've been having the conversation about inviting supervisors, program managers to join. How do you have this conversation? So just quick, hey Pat, have you gone through Building Change Together?
Not yet.
You know what? It's coming up. So why don't I
okay.
give you the information so you can check it out? I'd highly recommend
Awesome.
you attend. It's phenomenal for anyone involved in prevention.
Yep, that is how it is. And absolutely, we have had times when executive directors and financial and grant managers have come through and recognized that we need to talk to our teams before writing new grants, which is amazing. That is absolutely what should be happening, and having that communication, and for everyone in the organization to really understand what prevention is, because I don't know if other folks had that experience of feeling like, I'm not sure people know what it is that I do, other than put together a bunch of pretty papers and then go out and all the time. We know that there's rhyme and reason behind all of that, so being able to provide some space for folks to come in and learn about it is really, really valuable. So hope that folks are able to join us. And with that, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Pat.
Great. Okay.
So while Pat is loading up her PowerPoint, just wanted to share with everyone. I know we've explained a couple of times on these webinars, the Prevention Peer Network webinars. We have a statewide prevention program currently in place, focused on strengthening prevention, implementation, and evaluation across the state. So you'll see us using the hashtag prevention across CA a lot. We invite you to use it as well, because we really want people to see that we are united on our messaging, on our tools, on our sharing of information. So feel free to use that hashtag prevention across CA. And Pat is the fabulous evaluator on this project. So Pat supports Sheridan at Stand Strong, Clay at the Alliance for Community Transformation, myself at the partnership on our 3 different projects and on the statewide work, which means Pat is everyone's evaluator. Pat's like, hold on, be careful. So Pat is everybody's evaluator because we want to make sure that people have access to tools, and this is why we're doing these webinars. So we had one a while back on evaluation. What is the importance and need of evaluation in prevention? And there was a request for logic model. How do you develop one and what do you do with it? So that's what today is about. But we want you to know that this is part of the continued conversation. So if anything comes up along today and you're thinking, ooh, I would love to learn more about that, please chat it in or email it over to Miranda and I. Because we want to keep track of that so that we can continue supporting you. So Pat, thank you for being the statewide prevention program evaluator. We are incredibly thankful for you and the way in which you support all of us. So take it away.
Yay, okay. So as advertised in the description, this is an interactive and action-oriented webinar. So in other words, you're going to be doing a good part of the work. I saw some folks have teams, so that's great. You'll have a chance to work in your team. You will have opportunities to sort of contribute, because when you see a green comment box with a question, that is your cue to offer your thoughts, your experiences with logic models, and you can either unmute yourself and respond or put it in the chat box, and Alejandra will read that out loud. And then we'll also about halfway through, we'll have an opportunity for you to work independently in some teams and then come back. Let's see. And again, as Alejandra said, if along the way you think, hey, it'd be helpful to have more discussion about that thing that you talked about in one sentence, put that in the chat box, bring it up at the end, and we will move on that. Okay, as obviously the partnership is sponsoring this, but this is with funds from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and our standard disclaimer there. First green box, here we go. So in the past, what was the first thing that came to mind when you have been asked to do a logic model? Again, unmute or put it in the chat box. What do you think when you're asked to do either from a funder or a supervisor, or just thought, hey, this might be a good idea? What comes to mind?
Well, I can speak to when I first started at Stand Strong and was told that I should do a logic model, and I thought, what is a logic model? So, and I was even editing one that had already been previously created. So I think when I was asked to do a logic model, I was very hazy on what that actually was.
Okay.
Thanks, Sheridan. Others, we're seeing also in the comments, I'd pass it off to a colleague. I need to find a logic model template.
Okay.
Think of goals, outcomes that we want to achieve, and what current activities we have to work towards those outcomes. How, I was saying, where do I even start? How do I start? Inputs, outputs, working backwards if I need to. It's always helpful
Excellent.
with the person who gets different perspectives on it, to get different perspectives on it.
All right. Great. So why are we creating a logic model? Well, there's a couple reasons. One might be to describe current programs or your overall programmatic approach of your organization, but it's also used for planning. So you might want to outline expectations of new programming that you have planned or that you'd like to plan and perhaps seek funding for. Really, it's the same kind of logic model. You're going to answer the same questions for both types. Okay, so what are the benefits of a logic model? One will help others to understand what you're doing and why, summarizing your programs, and so you can communicate with folks very quickly what you're doing, and fill in that space between here's some activities, here's what we hope to achieve, but how is that going to happen? It helps you keep track of what you expect to change, to change. So people think of logic models sometimes when they're thinking about evaluation, but they're excellent for, and they're helpful for that, but also for planning. And does it make sense? Is your expected outcomes in line with the activities? Are they linked? It's important to know, what you're implementing and will it realistically change as a result of those activities. It organizes your planning in one place. Now, a logic model is not the same as a work plan. That's something a lot more detailed, but it puts in one place quickly. When you go to create your evaluation plan, you can see, okay, what is it that we said we would change? What do we want to measure? So in a field like ours, which is constantly underfunded for prevention, there's often a lot of staff turnover, unfortunately, and particularly with prevention staff. So when a new person is hired, or even if there's a change in leadership, it's nice to have your activities written down, and someone can see, okay, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing, this is why these surveys look the way they do, this is why I'm talking with these folks. So it's a helpful also within your team to understand what you're doing and why, and everyone sort of is on the same page. It is immensely helpful to evaluate. So evaluators love logic models. It helps us and you to know what is the most important things to evaluate. You don't have to evaluate everything on your logic model, and potentially not everything on that you're going to evaluate is on your logic model, but it's an excellent guide. And it also helps with long-term visioning. So this is the planning component of a logic model. What is it that we're hoping to achieve with our prevention programming overall? Not your one little program, but your big picture. What's our goal, and where do all our pieces of work and effort fit into that? Okay, so here's your plan. Your plan is that you're going to start, you're going to do activities. It's kind of like a honeymoon phase, and everything's going to go straight, and we're going to reach our goal. But ultimately, the reality is that we have a lot of detours, we have challenges, we have things that help us, we establish wonderful partnerships, and someone leaves and we have to reestablish partnerships, different hiccups along the way. Maybe your schools say, hey, yeah, come and do this programming, and then parents start going, we don't like this programming, and then you have to do some more education. So this, a logic model won't prevent those challenges, but it helps you to stay on course. It's that GPS that helps you to stay on course. And yes, your logic model may need to shift and change, but you're going to do that in an intentional way. In terms of evaluation, we're not talking too much about these different types of evaluation today. Could be another discussion, but it guides your evaluation so you know what it is you're evaluating to see, if it works, your outcomes, but also how does it work. Evaluation is about the process. So are you reaching the folks that you said you would reach? What's the quality of the programming? Where are the hiccups along the way? So those kind of process questions, the logic model will help with that as well. Okay, so what is a logic model? So let's step away from the work we're doing, our prevention work, and look at how we use logic models every day in our lives for things that we don't associate with work. We don't usually call them logic models, but we won't say, hey, in January, we're going to have some New Year's resolutions. Let's create a logic model for how I'm going to get fit or relax or get more involved. But it works as well. So can folks see what's this famous road trip that band across the top is showing? Anyone recognize that road trip there? Have any comments? You see anything? Shout it out.
Yes, Ana Garcia says 66.
That's right. So I have never done that, but here's Route 66, which I think is renamed now. But so a logic model is like a roadmap. So let's imagine I'm living in Chicago and I'm going to a training, maybe a prevention training in California or Sacramento. And I decide for some reason to drive there to do a road trip where, this is a great parallel. So where are we going? So going to Los Angeles. What do we expect to accomplish along the way? Maybe see some important sites exciting sites, fun sites along the Route 66. And also when we get there, what do we want to see when we get there? A logic model also help you make mid-course adjustments. So you may say, hey, that was not the route I want to take. I'd do something else, or maybe I'd fly next time. Or if I'm going to drive, I wouldn't do that in the winter. I'm never stopping again in such and such a town. So you wouldn't turn your GPS off. You might make an adjustment to your route. Okay, so now when we think about these pieces of information and bring it back to the work we're doing. So where are you going? Those are your goals. What do you expect to accomplish along the way before you get to your goal? Those are those outcomes. And also helping you to make mid-course adjustments so that affects your planning and your quality improvement of your program. So the logic model really applies to many things. And again, we're going to now sort of bring it back to our work. Let's see. I think an important part of a logic model is it doesn't just show the route, but it conveys why you're going to achieve your goals. It really is a sequence of cause and effect or if-then statements that share with folks how you're going to get from the money that they're giving you or the resources that you're investing to the long-term impact that you seek. So if you have those resources, and that's a question that can start with evaluation. Do you have your staff? Do you have the funding? Do you have the materials? If you have access to those resources, then you can accomplish your activities. And if you can carry out those activities as planned, then you will hopefully deliver the amount of product or service that you intend. So those products can be a curriculum, or maybe your activity is adapting a curriculum to your community's needs. And the output could be this adapted curriculum. It could be trainings. It could be partnerships that have been developed would be maybe be an outcome, but the activities you put into it, the meetings that you hold, the trainings that you create, those are your outputs. What results from them, if you're able to do those activities and create those outputs, then you start seeing your outcomes. Your participants will benefit in certain ways with knowledge, attitudes, behavior change, strengthened partnerships, educated, community. And if those happen, then your certain changes in your organizations, your communities, your systems might expect to occur. And again, particularly with prevention, this impact is a very long-term effort. So you're showing how the money now, the effort now, the resources now will lead way down the line to this long-term impact. Okay, there are some pitfalls or concerns that people often have about logic models, and that's that programs aren't always really linear. One thing doesn't necessarily always lead to another. There are some, as we saw, some things that are surprises or circuitous. These are your expectations. These are best, based on your best knowledge, what you think will happen. You're not sort of locked into a logic model, but it's a portrayal of what you believe to happen. And sometimes you may need, if you have some learnings along the way, you may need to adjust your logic model. Again, similarly, it can feel like it's oversimplifying a program. Again, it's a very high level picture. You have your own internal work plan about how things are happening, what are the challenges, what's the other work that you're doing, but it gives you a very high level picture. They can bog down your program if not well done. I've seen some logic models with so many arrows and curves and feedback loops that I can't figure out what's going on. So you want to keep it so it makes sense to you and it makes sense to your stakeholders. A logic model won't tell you if the right outcome is being identified and measured. That's up to you and up to you to learn and to do some research on. And if the research that, let's say you have a evidence-based program, if it's faulty or it's not a good fit to your community, you may not see those outcomes. And that's then the purpose of evaluation and planning to figure out. And it can be hard to identify and communicate some of your assumptions. So I'm going to pause here and see, has there been any questions, Alejandra? Are we moving ahead?
Nope.
Okay, great.
And just a kind reminder to folks that you will be receiving a copy of the PowerPoint and additional information, handouts and such after the webinar. So I know there's a lot of information coming and we're going to put it to good use in a bit.
Okay. So we're going to go through the structure of a logic model a little bit. We're not going to get too tied down in that today, but we'll sort of go over that. So one important thing is to think, really to start from what's the change that you want to see happen? It's helpful to move backwards, actually, in a logic model, and particularly if this is for the purposes of planning. What is the change that you want to see happen in your community, in your organization, wherever? And then what is the long-term effects? Then if you have activities or programs, what is the long-term effect of the activity? Is it on the individual, on the community, on the workplace, on your organizations? And what change do you expect to see maybe within 1 to 2 years after we implement an activity? And short-term outcomes, what are the activities or the outcomes we expect to see immediately after? So those are often maybe sort of some changes in knowledge or attitude. Sometimes behaviors really fall into the intermediate outcomes, and then short-term is more knowledge, attitude, behavior. Okay, and then we want to look at who will you reach with your activities and what will be produced. This is, are we going to engage some high schools or workplaces, or doing some education with some key decision makers in our community? And what will be the outputs? Sometimes you can collapse these into one, just say, what are your outputs? We're going to have this curriculum, this document, this report, this needs assessment that's created, that you're creating. But again, I want to remind you that the outputs are the things that you're creating, and those will lead to outcomes. And then what are the prevention activities that need to be implemented in order to address that problem? So activities are kind of like process objectives in that they are your action components. And then again, what do you need to implement your program successfully? Your resources, materials, your money, your people. It could be curriculum, training. Could be if your staff require training, that could be an investment in your resources or inputs. So that's your basic full logic model. Two other pieces that we often want to include, if they're important for people to understand, might be the assumptions about the work you're doing and external factors. Both of those can be things that will help you or support you in your work, or the challenges that you might be facing in your community. So if it feels like that's an important part of sharing with your stakeholders, what's not only what you're planning to do, but what is the context in which you're doing it, those are very helpful to include. So I'm going to share a very simple, basic logic model. Let's say our goal is to reduce perpetration of intimate partner violence and dating violence in our schools and community. And we're going to implement CBIM. So I'm kind of keeping this simple, and I'm keeping this focused on, you can see the outcomes are on the athletes. So we need funding, prevention staff, partnerships in our education system. Yes, Alejandra.
Coaching boys and the men.
I'm sorry, coaching boys and the men. Apologies. Thank you. And our activities are to engage schools to participate, to train coaches to deliver CBIM, and to support coaches ongoing to implement. Because we know with this particular program, you don't just train people and leave them on their way. They need support. And so we're hoping, our goal is to engage 2 high schools and 3 middle schools in this program, and to have 10 coaches trained who will reach, over some defined time period, let's say 450 students who will participate. Athletes, so here's some of the outcomes. Might be athletes will have increased knowledge of IPV and TDV or abusive behaviors, and then increased knowledge of how to intervene. Given that knowledge, they will hopefully have some intermediate outcomes of at least increasing intention to engage in active or positive bystander behavior, and also to avoid some of that negative stuff. And with the long-term outcome of reductions in peer norms that are supportive of violence, or you can say increase norms of healthy relationships and healthy interactions. You'll see here, I've really just focused on, for simplification's sake, athletes, but who else could be impacted by a program like this happening in schools that I'm probably leaving out? I would say I haven't written in so many outcomes about coaches.
Sheridan says coaches in the student body.
Coaches. So I have nothing here about the benefit coaches may have or the outcomes they may have as ambassadors of the program and ambassadors of the goals of the program and being models. I haven't incorporated perhaps a social marketing component in the school. You know, you have these students who have been exposed to a curriculum, then what's going to happen in the school? So that's not part of this. That would be part of a little more of a comprehensive logic model. My assumption is that, you know, Coaching Boys and Men, it's an evidence-based program developed by our friends here on our webinar Futures, with potential to reduce violence. And our assumption is that coaches are able to deliver programs with the support of an advocate. We have a positive factor in this community that we have strong relationships with our schools and recognition of the need for prevention programming, so that's good. If we didn't have that, that might be an external factor too. If we have to do some work around educating our schools about what's happening in their own schools, I would add that in as steps in this plan as well, if that were important. Okay, let me go back. Okay, so here we have one comment I wanted to make is that I have these in columns, but sometimes you may have certain activities that lead to particular, or outputs that lead to particular outcomes, but not all of them. If I had my coaches level outcomes in here, I might want to say, you know, some of those outcomes will be particular to their work or the work with them. Some will be with athletes. So that's where we get into the boxes and the arrows and the pointing and things like that. We're not going to work through that today, but we are going to share with you this template. And this will come to you when we send the recording and the PowerPoint. And this is in a Word document, so you can add boxes, subtract boxes, move them, add arrows, and combine them. So you will have this to work with. Okay. I'm going to ask again, any questions? This is a good sort of point to pause. Any questions?
What's coming up for folks? And you know, it's a good opportunity to kind of check the temperature of everyone. For some, it can be incredibly overwhelming, and it's like, okay, how do I break this down? For others, it's like, all right, I got this. Let's get going. So just give us your honest opinion. What's coming up for you as you're hearing all this?
For me, this is Hisham Alibab from the Alliance to End Abuse. For me, what's coming up is it looks like a very useful tool. I am wondering if it's possible to see a completed version, because it kind of I can kind of imagine how it would work, but it looks a bit complicated with the arrows and the boxes and the, you know, but it looks very organized and valuable.
Okay, we do have an example a little farther down, but and it's true, and that's why we don't want to get too bogged down in the boxes. That's sort of the finished product, and so I'm going to hold on to that and pin that comment and see if we get that answered at the end. So thank you. We'll come back to that. For sure, but I think sometimes when we ask someone to do a logic model, that's where they get stuck. Oh my goodness, how am I going to do all the boxes and the arrows and all that? What I want to do is for us to have just some conversation and to put the boxes and all those labels and the columns aside for just a little bit. We're going to come at this a little different way and ask a series of questions.
So I have a question, Pat.
Yeah.
It says from Misty, best practice around how specific to get.
Okay, great. Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any other thoughts coming up for folks?
Is that specific about outcomes or activities or all of it?
I have a feeling Misty is typing. I was thinking about all the outcomes, she says.
Okay, right. So we're gonna touch on that a little bit in the tips, but are folks familiar with SMART outcomes and SMART goals? And hopefully you've seen those. So they have to fit for this. This isn't your whole narrative of all your activities, but we do want to make sure that we have realistic and specific things in terms of increasing knowledge of an issue or increasing behavior of something. We can't write full sentences in our logic model, so it's a little bit of shorthand, but we do need, and we're going to get into a little bit about how those writing a SMART objective applies here. So when I get to that, see if that answers your question. If not, we'll pause. Is there anything else? Okay. So pretty soon, in a few minutes, we're going to give you an opportunity to start working on either a program that's already in place or one that you're visioning. But we want to, what I found is the best way is don't start with the boxes. Don't even start with the columns. Start asking and working with your team on a series of questions. And one of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit is sort of the benefit of working in a team, and we're going to get to that a little bit. But the questions that we're going to want to answer, and we're going to start on today, is first, what is the change that you want to see happen? And what are, what is that, that big picture, but what are the prevention activities that will be implemented to meet this goal? And you may not have all those in place now. You may say, hey, we want to find a program that can do this, or develop an effort to do some more social marketing, or educating on policy. What specific changes do you want to see or expect to see immediately after you implement your activities? And let's say, what changes do we expect to see within a year after we implement them? And then what are the long-term effects of that activity, either on the individual, the community, the workplace, the school community? There are a couple of questions we may not get at because they can take a lot of time. Those assumptions, the context questions can take a while to think about, and are a really good discussion point for staff. So 6 and 7 you may not get to today, but we're going to focus a little bit on 1 through 5. So first, some tips. Using visuals and group facilitation. If you're in a team there and you have some easel paper in a room, you might want to use that, or a whiteboard, or if you're just sitting, there's a worksheet that, those questions are on a worksheet that I think is in the chat box or was sent to you earlier, those 7 questions. I will leave that up. I'm going to come back to those and leave it up. But doing this as a group facilitated conversation is a great way to get input on its development, making sure it's appropriate to your community. And it builds up, it's a good team building exercise so that everyone is on the same page, what we're doing, why we're doing it, what impact we expect to see, what are the challenges we expect to see, what are reasonable outcomes. Try to do it maybe in a little, like a retreat, some kind of setting. Give yourself, a couple of hours to do that if you need to get it all done. And don't focus too much on those boxes immediately. Really focus on those 7 questions. Work backwards a little bit. What is that change you expect to see? And then the activities that will bring you there, and make sure that they all flow and make logical sense. Will those activities get you to your short-term, intermediate, and long-term outcomes? A logic model should optimally be 1 page. Now, sometimes you may, if you have a complex program or several strategies, or we're going to talk a little bit about doing an organizational level logic model, you may have 1 page at the very high level logic model, and then for each of those strategies, a separate page. So you might say have a page for your, say, school level activities, or your social marketing activity logic model, or your policy education. That would do it, but try to keep them pretty much to 1 page. And then we want to get a little bit back to this sort of SMART goals and how that applies to a logic model. Okay, so if people remember, yes, you want to be specific. So you don't want to, for an outcome, we don't want to say just increase their knowledge, but what are they going to increase the knowledge of? Let's say increasing knowledge of an aspect of healthy relations, like good communication skills, or warning signs, or what abuse looks like. So we want to be specific there. Somewhat measurable. You don't have to define your measure there, or how, you don't need to write how you're going to measure it there. That's for your evaluation plan. But it should also be attainable, and the idea of having these short-term and intermediate outcomes these are your small wins. If you jump right to your long-term impact, I'm going to do this healthy relationships curriculum, and our graduation rates are going to increase. Probably not even realistic or or attainable, and not related. So you want to make sure that you see the small steps along the way. Prevention is really challenging. It's a very long-term kind of effort. So we want to make sure that still they're attainable and they're relevant and they're related to the work you're doing. So you have to make sure that and this is the benefit of working in the team, are the goals that we're promising or the outcomes we're promising, is that doable with the work that we're doing? Is your dosage, if you're doing, let's say, working with one school in your community, are you going to see change at the larger community level? If you're a small rural community, maybe, but if you're a large city, you want to keep those measures relevant to the work you're doing and related to the dosage that you are doing. And also, I want to talk about time-based. You will likely see you would hope to see your short-term outcomes within a short period of time. But those long-term, you may not see. If you have a 2-year funding grant, yes, you want to show how the work that you're doing now will lead down the road to some long-term outcomes and impact. But you don't want to promise that you're going to be able to measure those long-term within that 2 years. That's not realistic. So sometimes what we do, and we've done this with the partnership, is put some time frames at the top, in brackets at the top of your logic model. So this is what we expect to see in the next 2 years. And this is more of a 5-year goal or a 10-year goal so that people understand. Yes, Alejandra.
Sorry, I was hoping you'd finish your statement. I was just going to ask that, like, this is where I think some of us get stuck is, especially once we start looking at the outer layers of the social ecological model, the community and societal levels. It's like, what is attainable? What can I actually measure? And what if I'm starting this project and it's kind of funded on a 3 versus 2-year grant. So this is awesome, and I think some of us get stuck here. So what is measurable? What is attainable? What is realistic?
Right. So you do want to show what's going to happen long term, but also be able to tell them, within a certain time frame, this is what we can measure for you during this time period. But this is what your investment, our community's investment is going to get us long term based on our understanding of the work. Okay. I want to get back to the person who asked about specificity in terms of like activities. You want to say like train X number of teachers or increase knowledge of this or that, or with the specific behaviors you want to see. Did I get to that question, or do you want to follow up on that?
No, I think you touched on it for sure. And I feel like I'm in a slightly better place. I thought that when you said later on in the webinar there would be like specific examples plugged in, so I was kind of holding out for that.
So, yep. Okay. We will get. I'm wondering if it would be helpful to jump to something and then jump back. Yeah. Okay. Let me do that. Okay. I'm gonna. Okay, we're going to talk about comprehensive programming, but okay, so here is another example with boxes and arrows. Let's say you have, this is sort of like a college. Let's say this is a college campus, sexual violence prevention. Oops, I was going to take that line out, sorry, program. So you might be doing a number of different things: prevention education, events on campus, mandatory a school orientation, residence life programming, workshops and presentations. But you might also have a social marketing campaign. So here you can see where certain activities and outcomes lead to other things. So with the work that you might be doing with the students, you're going to have increased knowledge of dating and sexual violence, increased knowledge of healthy relationships, increasing skills in promoting respect. Prevention, visibility of prevention messaging might actually, I might do some more lines with the social marketing. That might be more along the social marketing lines. But if you have this increased knowledge and skills and attitude, then we're going to have increased acts of bystander intervention, hopefully reduction in norms supporting aggression, increasing in positive gender norms, and then ultimately reducing dating violence on campus. And also community connectedness. So here we have some different ideas of like where arrows and boxes might work. But when you have a specific program for yourself, you're going to know what's going to lead to what and what makes sense. But here again, someone's asking about specific, we can't put a whole sentence in a box. You would do that in your proposal or your internal documents or your work plans. So does this help with sort of an example? Again, this is sort of a general.
Oh yeah.
Specific. Okay. Is this good?
This
okay.
is exactly what I was envisioning. Thank you.
And I will tell you, you could Google logic model on something or other, and then you could look at them and critique them as well. Yes, Alejandra.
So then for all of us, right, so maybe another conversation would be developing an evaluation plan. So then I need to make sure that I have a way to demonstrate, or, you know, for us, our team or organization or our funders, that this is actually creating an outcome, right, an impact. So increased skills in promoting respect. How do I know that? Increased engagement at prevention events. How am I going to measure that? So that would be the next step conversation. Is that correct?
Yep. So this is not your evaluation plan, but this is an awesome tool. And you'll see each box is a particular outcome. If you start seeing ands anywhere, that's always a warning flag when you're writing a question or doing anything. If you're combining two different things in one outcome, take another look at it, because you may achieve one and not the other. They may be very different. So the nice thing about the boxes is you kind of have them all discrete, and you can say, oh, we could reach this one this way, and do a survey or do a focus group or do photo voice or something like that with different ways. So this is not your evaluation plan. It's not your work plan either. It's just a very high level picture to convey to stakeholders about what you're doing.
Okay. So this is really helpful as we're having the discussion around how challenging it is to advocate for prevention funding, because it's hard to prove, right? So when we're talking about shelter-based programs, you can say the number of beds, the number of clients that you had in and out in a month, in a week, in a day, in an hour. And in prevention, it's a little harder because these are things that you don't measure in an instant. So I think for me, this is really helpful in that we are ending teen dating violence, relationship violence, sexual violence, and how do we show this? So this is a great example of items that we can use for our funders and local, county, statewide, city, that shows that we are creating an impact. So thank you.
Okay. So let's have some fun and have some conversations then. I'm going to go back there. So you, if you have a worksheet, great. If not, work with your team, hopefully. Yes.
Yep. So everyone should have received the handout during the reminder email that went out. If you have it, don't have it, please let us know. I also added it in the chat. The questions handout was sent to everyone, so you're able to download that. You can take a picture of this screenshot. Let me know what works for you all, but I sent it out. If you did not see it in the chat, I can add it again.
And if you all already have some description of your project or a vision of what you want, if you don't have a current project and have something you want to do, start with that. Working from planning, working backwards. So yeah, what do we want let's do like 10 minutes and check back in and see where folks are and what questions they have. How does that sound? Yeah, try to get, move 1 through 5, start moving, yeah.
Yeah, take a couple of minutes with your team if you are with your team, or on your own, answering these questions. Again, as Pat said, we probably won't get through all 7, but just start jotting down some ideas, especially 1 through 5. So can we do, let's start at 5 to 10 minutes and kind of see where we're at, and then we'll come back. We're not going to go anywhere. We're just, you can stop your video or mute yourself. Pat, Miranda, and I are here. If you have any questions as you go along, you can chat them to us individually. But take some time, go through these questions, answer them so that we can start working on some logic models. And if you are not able to download the handout from the chat, please add your email into the chat, or send it on over to me via email, and I can immediately send it to you. So that was 5 minutes. Just checking in to see how are folks doing. Do you have the questions? Are you going through them okay? I also asked in the chat what would be helpful, for example, having Pat put the slide up with the sample logic model. Let us know what you need. Do you have specific questions for Pat, Miranda, or I? Send them our way. What do you need? Is this working? Are you finding some juices and answering these questions? What's going on? Thank you, Misty, for responding. She says, doing good, just answering the questions. It helps us to know what's working, what's not, because we can't see you. So we just want to make sure that everyone's doing all right and answering the questions. So we'll leave you alone for another 3 minutes. One more minute. All right, how are folks doing? Can we come back? Again, we understand that it's hard in quick 10 minutes to get 1 through 7 done. If you did, congrats. But just want to hear some thoughts from you all, if we can gather back on up, and Pat will continue the conversation.
Yeah. So clearly, we're not going to get a whole logic model done in 20 minutes. This is, a longer effort, but wanted to get a good start on it. And I hope folks are seeing some of the benefit of working with partners and teams on this. Can someone share sort of where they are with one of the questions, a couple of the questions, and how where they're going, and then how was it? What was it going? And how did that feel? And any questions you have.
So you can share by unmuting yourself. You can also share your document if you're typing in, and you can chat, you can type them into the chat box. So there's different ways for you to participate. I would invite folks, if you are able to share your video, that's always helpful so that we can see you. We also know that some folks, because they are in shared space, cannot, but just inviting you all to use the spaces and opportunities to engage.
So would you all like us to read our answers out loud?
Sure. If you're comfortable, I'd love it to hear how that's going.
Okay. I'm definitely comfortable. I just didn't want to take up all the space. So for the first one, the change that we want to see happen is to end domestic violence. I don't know if that's too grand of a change, but the second question, so what we need to do is to make specific efforts to recruit and include men in the prevention conversation. That's sort of where we are here. Mm-hmm. The third, what do we expect to see immediately? Pushback, maybe resistance, discussion. At least that's what I've seen here. And then fourth, what changes do we expect to see within a year? We expect to see our efforts, paying off a little bit, and hopefully have gotten off the ground and expanded a little.
So what
say, for
specifically,
instance,
like what might you specifically, what would that look like? Like, how would you know that's happening? If things were...
Great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one thing I'm envisioning is here in our county, we have 2 community colleges and a private college. So one thing that I would want to see within a year, let's say we had a town hall discussion at one of the community colleges. I'd like to see that replicated, maybe expanded. I'd hopefully like to hear from folks at the college and, get their feedback about how we could do it better, and just kind of see it take off, get off the ground.
Awesome.
For long-term effects would be more male engagement in our community, and to kind of make the conversation normalized in male-only spaces. So kind of like what you were saying about, the student athletes, but we'd like to see more, maybe in a workplace that's mostly men. Let's say a manufacturing plant. We'd like to see, that conversation, not just a one-off, kind of like first in a series. And then number 6, does that say assumptions? Assumptions about how the program will work? I assume that it'll take some convincing, that it'll be slow to start and may get bogged down because of things. I know that we're constantly working in a system where there's like power brokers and, certain barriers to entry and, you know, folks that have been longtime
Right.
practitioners that are reluctant and will slow walk things. Number 7 is about what are the external factors? Oh, this one to me was pretty clear. So for us, we are a county government and we're constantly having to, a lot of the things that we want to do are subject to the will of the politicians that control everything. So our board of supervisors, our politicians at the state level, the federal level. Funding is always kind of, there's a lot of red tape around funding because of politics again. So yeah, that seems to me to be one of the large factors that we're working in.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. That was wonderful to hear. That's an amazing amount to have done in like 10 minutes. Yay, that is awesome. And then when you all have time to like sit down more and have your retreat or over lunch or whatever, yeah, just try to get a little more specific. Like, what are those specific activities, and getting, you know, specific. Like, how do you know what those changes, like when you see them, how do you know, what will they look like? That is an amazing amount of work in 10 minutes. Impressive. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Do we want to hear from others, Pat?
Sure, if someone else would like to share, or any challenges they had, or something they like to share about just the process of doing this and how did that feel, or any questions. So if you don't want to share the product, like how was this doing it in a conversation mode rather than getting bogged down in the boxes and the columns and the categories. I've done this with folks where we do it like a group. I'll be scribing up on the paper, ask these questions, scribe on the paper, and then the group is just brainstorming. It's really kind of a brainstorming activity. And then we'll go through it and say, okay, which are the things that really stand out that we really want to have in the logic model? And only after all that do we start playing around with boxes and arrows and that. So I want to sort of hear, how was this different than how you've done it before, or is this typical? Did this feel like a good approach? And you can either chat or unmute. Great, thank you.
Can I pick on some folks?
Right.
From the chat, it sounded like Misty was filling out the questions. Misty, can I pick on you to share a bit with us? She's probably like, I knew you were going to do that. Yeah, she says, right.
Oh, there we go. Okay, since we're dual SAI PV, I did increased awareness around sexual assault of minors, and then a decrease in sexual violence perpetrated against children and youth. And so that says your goals, and then communities knowledgeable, capable, and trauma-informed for prevention and health promotion. So I would, you could break those down into separate things, because knowledgeable, capable might be two different things. Oh, that's all Q1. Oh, sorry. Wow. And those might, some of those might go into like a long-term goal. Awesome. Okay. Big goals are good, and those are specific. What I like, those are really for goals. Those are very specific, so that's really nice. really, yeah, no apologies. The goals are good.
So this is what I'm saying. Use this opportunity, because if there is one thing, I mean, I have a million things to thank Pat for, but there is one thing that she does is she takes my ginormous goals of wanting to create change in our communities and really helps me focus them in on smart goals that we can then plug into a logic model. So yes, keep it going. What
All right.
are some thoughts? And don't, we invite you to please don't be afraid. This is an opportunity for all of us to share. We're all at different levels of our experience with logic models. So share. Thank you so much, Misty.
Okay.
Jane, did you get a chance to fill any of those questions out? Can I pick on you? Jessica Villalobos says, stuck with what increased knowledge in the community can look like.
So that's the how you're going to measure it. And that might be another discussion. How will you know that that's happening? And that I would move that more to evaluation planning. But for a logic model, you can say increase knowledge in community. But yes, measuring that can be tricky. And I would also encourage you to say, what is community? Is community really everyone in your community? Look at who you're, trace it back to your activities. Where are your activities happening? And what parts of the community will those activities impact? And that might be helpful. Okay, I'm gonna, we have a couple of other things I wanna move on. So I'm gonna move forward, but feel free to email later as you're working through these. Oh, come back. There we go. So now that you've engaged with these questions a little bit, who should be, and this you could just type into the chat, who do you think should be involved in the development of the program or your organization's logic model? Who should be in the room writing this down and thinking about this and defining this? You can just throw that in the chat, please. Should this be your grant writer? What happens if your grant writer is writing your logic model? Unless you're also the grant writer and the preventionist, but. Right, frontline prevention educators. Sure. Oops, okay. Okay, the staff who are doing the groundwork and the community participants of prevention workshops, community members. Absolutely. And again, this is a really amazing way to sort of set some time aside, put papers up on the wall, have brainstorming discussions. And, if your outcomes get very lofty and beyond what you're doing now, say, what else do we need? What funding do we need? What resources do we need? What partners do we need to do this all together in our community?
This is a great way to really break down some of those barriers, some of the gatekeeping that occurs that keeps us separate from sharing of knowledge and leadership. We've all been in spaces where a logic model has been created for us, or we show up to a job and it's really hard to know what's going on. So if you have an opportunity, as folks have shared, to engage as many as possible, if you have the grant writer, the prevention manager, the staff, the director, depending on who else is involved. And of course, if we're doing community engagement, who does that mean, right? So let's define, as Pat shared, what community means so that we can engage folks in this conversation.
Okay, a couple more questions to think about and share. Oops, my cursor keeps going off. Okay, one, how will you use your logic model? Okay, let's jump forward. You have a pretty logic model. You can put pictures on it too. It doesn't have to be all cold boxes and such, but how will you use your logic model, and how can you share this with stakeholders in your community? Has anyone done that? People who've had logic models, either they've created or been created for them, how have you used your logic model? And then how have you also used it for yourselves internally? How has it helped you or could help, or how can you see it could help you internally? Who do you see that you could share this with? Can you see this besides, I assume funders now want to see these. Could you see going to like sharing this and getting some feedback on a draft from a community, from your community members? Okay, we use them for internal planning and to communicate with board members and funders. You're going to put a whole lot of time into these. How might you use them? Are they going to stay on the shelf or in the computer, or is this something folks might put, does it look pretty enough on their website, share with those that you're trying to engage?
So we're hearing from folks, we use them for internal planning and to communicate with board members and funders. They help in explaining our work to partners who aren't necessarily primary prevention aware. Yes, thank you. I was sharing it can also be helpful for us to share with staff from other programs or departments. Great way to show them what we do. Sometimes folks think that prevention staff are just about arts and crafts in high schools.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. Okay, I'll spend just a few minutes on comprehensive prevention programming and where the logic model fits in there. Are folks familiar with the socio-ecological model of prevention? This is the idea here, is that this is a socio-ecological model. It's used a lot by the CDC, and other folks may see it. And it helps us understand that an individual's behavior is not only under their own control, but it's impacted by your friends and your family, the places where you work, your community, your school, the social norms that exist in those spheres, policies, and other settings which live in our lives. So that means if that's all influencing our behavior, that's where our prevention work needs to happen. So healthy relationships discussions are great, but if it doesn't move beyond that second circle, how are you going to impact what's happening in the community and how that affects your relationships and your social norms? If those discussions don't happen in what we call those outer layers, then we're not doing comprehensive prevention. Another model is the spectrum of prevention, and that's used extensively by the Prevention Institute. I don't know if folks have seen this. This is familiar too. These are the 6 levels. They span the ecological model, and the interventions are implemented at each level. They complement each other. So each one reinforces the other levels, and that results in the comprehensive programming. So to learn more about that, you can go to the Prevention Institute's website, but it also shows different places. You may be working, I think a lot of like schools will say, okay, come and do a curriculum with our youth, and the box is checked. We've done what we need to do. Well, no, you need to work with staff. You need to look at the policies and practices and the staff behaviors that also model or impact the whole school community. So moving beyond the students' behavior themselves to look at a whole entire community. So I'm going to go back to this logic model and think about what are some of the different socioecologic levels or spectrum levels that you see operating in this logic model. And we're really close here, but what do you see operating, and what do you think could be done on this campus to expand the model to be more comprehensive? So, just type in one or the other. What could make this a more comprehensive prevention programming on this campus? You've got a couple of strategies: working with the students, doing social marketing. What else would make this a little more comprehensive that could be built into this model? What do we know about the policies on this campus in response, the response policies? Maintenance staff, awesome, thank you. How about the physical layout of the school? Are there things that are more environmental at the campus that could make it more safe? Lighting, accompaniment, things like that. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to talk about with this logic model is that you can have, there's several different strategies. This is more than one program portrayed on this logic model. There's different things happening. So you can have a very high level logic model for all your prevention programming in your organization, and have lines going from each strategy to the outcomes they're supposed to create, and then separate logic models that go deeper into each of those strategies and what each is supposed to accomplish and how it's going to get you to that end goal. So this is part of sort of thinking about comprehensive prevention planning. Okay, we're at time, so I just wanted to share, and this will go out in your PowerPoint. There's some resources here specifically on developing logic models, and then also more generally on evaluation. And these are some of the resources that we shared at our last webinar as well. Also, Strategic Prevention Solutions has some free worksheets on our website that you can download. And last, I wanted to ask, is there any additional evaluation training, technical assistance training through the network here, PPN, that you would like to see in coming months? Anything else, like the difference between how to do an evaluation plan, or how difference between outcome and process evaluation? Let us know, either write it in here or send Alejandra a note of things that would be helpful.
So we have measurable indicators for evaluation. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, as Pat shared, you can email Miranda, Pat, myself, any other information that you would like. Pat, thank you so much. I have a lot of questions, next steps for other logic models. We appreciate everyone's time so much. We appreciate your energy, and to everyone who has shared and contributed and asked questions, thank you so much. Your engagement helps us further this conversation. We appreciate you all. Pat, immensely. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And we'll be sending a follow-up email with all of the information. And just like we know evaluation is extremely crucial, we will have a really brief survey within that, so we can capture some feedback there as well. Thank you.
And in that feedback, is there a place for them to write in other evaluation support they'd like, or webinars? Just open in there? Okay.
Have a wonderful holiday and Happy New Year, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Mhm.